Hey, what's going on guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the Reebok Nano X3 Adventure. So 3 pros that I have with this model is number 1, I think this is the strongest adventure model to date. Now that might be a strong take, but here's my placement thus far. X3 Adventure, X1 Adventure, X2 Adventure. So why I like this model the most is the features that Reebok implemented on this shoe feel more like upgrades versus like just kind of making a spin-off shoe with some niche features that cost more. So this model feels like an upgrade regarding its performance, and it also has a nice clean aesthetic. So we finally have a couple of adventure colorways that don't necessarily shout like loud colors and stuff. So I like the subtlety and the look of this shoe as a whole, and the features that Reebok changed on this model feel like upgrades versus just kind of being like niche spin-offs. So that is my first pro, that the X3 Adventure, calling it now, is the strongest model to date in the Adventure line. The second pro that I have with this shoe is that Reebok used Vibram rubber on the outsole of this model. So this model's full rubber outsole has a nice aggressive lug tread patterning, and it feels a little bit more tacky than the prior 2 models. Plus we have an extended outsole wrap here, and this Vibram rubber wraps on the medial and lateral side here, and does a pretty good job of gripping ropes. So now I will say this outsole grips ropes crazy good, so you're definitely gonna have to adjust, I think, with the pressure you're putting into the sole, because if you're putting too much, like, you could cause it to lip, but that's with any rubber that's really grippy and tacky for rope climbs. So I like the Vibram rubber because it's a little bit more tacky and it feels more aggressive and more durable compared to the other adventure models that have used a more aggressive lug tread patterning to date. I also like when companies typically use Vibram rubber, especially for trail shoes, because it tends to last a while in general, and it's kind of one of those compounds and materials that has kind of been tried and true with its performance. My third pro with this model is that if you're somebody who likes to vary their training a lot and you train outdoors, I think this is one of the best training shoes in class for outdoor workouts. For example, I have run a couple of 5Ks in this shoe throughout the woods and whatnot when I was in Michigan the other week, and they felt pretty good. And I've deadlifted 500 pounds in this model, and the stability was just as fine as well. So I think if you're somebody who likes to go outside at all for their training and you want a shoe that can kind of hold their own and not break down super fast, I think that's where the Adventure is going to excel. And now that is a very niche athlete and lifter, but if that is you, I think you can feel confident in this model regarding its overall performance. But now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with the Nano X3 Adventure. So 2 cons that I could see folks having with the Reebok Nano X3 Adventure is number 1, the boot can be a little bit interesting. And so if you're somebody who constantly feels like they have their training shoes that rub right under the medial or lateral malleolus, I think this will definitely be one of those models that will have that issue. Now it takes a week or so to break in, and once this material gets a little bit more pliable, it's not going to be an issue in my opinion, but because this boot is a little bit more rigid at the top here, I could see it causing some rub issues on certain foot anatomies. That's not going to be an every time case, but it's definitely something that I would keep an eye on if that is something that typically bothers you with shoes, especially during the break-in process. You might just want to wear longer socks when breaking these in to kind of hedge your bets there. My second con with this shoe is that its price point is 150 USD, so it definitely has a more premium and higher price point, and that's why I say, like, if you're not going to be using this shoe outdoors at all and not really buying them for their more niche focus, you can look into a Nano X2 on sale, a Nano X3 on sale, and save a little bit of money, and you'll get just as much performance out of those shoes, in my opinion, regarding lifting and cross training. So my second con is that if you're not going to use this shoe for its intended purposes, or if you're not really like loving the X3 Adventure shoe line necessarily for its colorway and whatnot and its novelty, then I would say save some money, because the shoe's price point is a little bit high. But now let's talk about the performance of the Nano X3 Adventure. So to chat on the performance of the Reebok Nano X3 Adventure, I'll discuss how the shoe performs for lifting, versatile training, short runs and trail runs and hiking, and then daily wear. In the context of lifting, I would say you can expect the shoe to give you a similar level of stability as like your Reebok Nano X3, Nano X2, and whatnot. I don't think the lugs are necessarily going to take away from your ability to ground the feet and stabilize the feet when lifting in this shoe. I've trained up to 500 pounds on deadlifts in this model, and it felt fine. The higher stack height could be a turnoff for some, especially because you are gonna have a little bit more height here with the lugs, but I think for most folks, I don't think it's gonna be a major issue with this model if you plan to use them outdoors, then bring them in for some heavier lifting sessions. I also like that the rubber outsole grips really well. So if you're training on turf, for example, and you're regularly tackling like lower body accessories on turf, then I could see this shoe being actually a really strong model for that context. So when it comes to lifting, the shoe should perform pretty well. And I think for most folks who just want this model for some general strength work and general strength sessions, the shoe should fit the bill. When it comes to cross training and versatile training, I've also enjoyed this model. So you have that lift and run chassis system here that is consistent with the Reebok Nano X3. I think that's a nice play for this shoe because it does add a little bit more bounce with this model. Also with that Reebok Float Ride Energy Foam midsole, you do get a nice level of pliability too. So once this model breaks in, it does give you a nice level of responsiveness. Now with the upper construction and how it is layered, I do like the security of this model as well. So if you're doing multi-directional work and lateral exercises, I think you should be fine in this model. And I don't think you're gonna have spillover issues in this shoe whatsoever. And I like that Reebok didn't necessarily like rework the full lacing system in this shoe compared to the Reebok Nano X3, which was something they did in the X2 Adventure, and it caused like that weird top pressure at the top of the foot. So I do like that. And I don't think the upper is gonna be an issue for most folks in the context of versatile training. Now I will say, if you're gonna be using this shoe for CrossFit workouts and you plan to rope climb in them, this outsole is gonna grip a ton, which I've already mentioned. So you're definitely gonna have to take a couple of sessions, I think, to kind of like rework how much pressure you're putting into the rope. And that way you're also making sure that you're not gonna break this shoe down, doing something silly like just gripping way too hard and pulling the sole clean away from this model. In the context of short runs, trail runs and hikes, and then also daily wear, the shoe should perform pretty well for most folks. Now, I would not necessarily use this shoe for runs that are longer than 5K distances, but if you're doing 1, 2, 3 miles, whether that's on a treadmill, road, or on trails, the shoe should work pretty well. I also like that this model feels a little bit more trail focused compared to the other models in my opinion. So I think the outsole here will give you a bit more regarding grip on different trail difficulties. So if you're running, for example, on like gravel, rocks, and just like some loose terrain, this shoe should work pretty well. Is it gonna be the best on like technical stuff? Maybe not, but I do think this model has a better trail edge compared to the other two Nano Adventure models. I also like this model for daily wear because it does have a slightly cleaner aesthetic. Plus with this full rubber outsole, you do get a nice level of durability. Now I will say with lugs in most shoes, especially trail shoes, if you're gonna be doing a lot of high volume concrete use on them, you could break these lugs down. I've played pickleball on the shoe a couple of times and I'm not necessarily breaking the lugs down, but you can see a little bit of fading, but that is a lot of friction on concrete. So just food for thought there, because that is something I'm always concerned about with trail shoes, especially shoes with lugs like this that do have a bit more tackiness to them. Concrete, especially at high volume, can kind of shave them down. But I think if you are just using these here and there for some daily wear, some short runs, and then even a pickleball session here and there like I have, I think you will be fine, but I definitely want to make that known if you plan to use this shoe in those contexts. Overall, the Reebok Nano X3 Adventure though has been a strong shoe across the board for performance. It is very similar to the Nano X3, and I don't think the changes made in this model necessarily hurt its performance. I actually think it kind of boosts the shoe's performance in certain training verticals. So when it comes to the price of the Reebok Nano X3 Adventure, you can expect to pay $150 USD. Now that is up $10 from the traditional Reebok Nano X3, which cost $140. So again, I'm gonna talk on this in my next section, but if you're not buying this shoe for its niche focus, I would say potentially hold off on dropping $150 on the shoe, or wait 6 to 8 months and have them go on sale and then cop a pair then. All right, so now to answer the question, who should and shouldn't buy the Reebok Nano X3 Adventure? So who should buy this model? Number one, if you're somebody who plans to do any form of outdoor training, or you're somebody who just wants a singular shoe for hiking, doing some light trail runs, and then also going to the gym, that's where this model is going to excel the most. I also see this model working pretty well for folks with like slightly wider feet. Generally, this model will last for slightly wider feet. Now, if you have like double E width feet and wider, or if you have flat feet and you don't like any form of arch, then you'll want to pass on this shoe. But if you have like medium to slightly wider feet like myself, I do think you'll find that the shoe fits your foot anatomy pretty well. So that said, if you are somebody who wants a training shoe that can also perform outdoors, that is where I think the Reebok Nano X3 Adventure is going to excel the most. Now, who shouldn't buy this shoe? First, I think if you're trying to spend a little bit less money, look into the older models of the Adventure shoes. If you are wanting a training shoe for outdoor workouts, you can likely find the X1 or X2 Adventure on sale. Are they strong performers? Not necessarily, and that's up for debate, but I do think they'll fit the bill for most folks, and you can save a little bit of money by looking into them. The second context is, if you're not planning on training outdoors, save your money and go with an X2, X3, etc. Try to find them on sale, because at a price of $150 USD, I think if you're not really buying the shoe for its niche intent, then you're kind of spending extra money just to spend it. Now, if you are a collector of nanos, that is totally different and I'm not necessarily talking to you. But for folks who are confused on like, should I get the Nano X3 or the Nano X3 Adventure? If you're not really training outdoors or planning to use this shoe for hikes, etc., just go with the X3, save a little bit of money because this model does have a higher price point. So when it comes to the sizing and fit of the Reebok Nano X3 Adventure, I think most folks should be safe going true to size in this model. So I have a medium to slightly wider foot, and I like to vary the sock thicknesses that I wear with the shoe based on what I'm using them for. In all those settings, the shoe has fit pretty true. So I think if you're similar with your foot anatomy, true to size will be the call. Now, if you have a notably narrow foot, you might want to go down a half size. And then on that note, if you have a notably wide foot or a flat foot and you hate any form of arch at all in your shoe, I would say potentially pass on this model. It is not going to be as wide as the older Nano model. So for example, the Nano 2.0 and whatnot, which is still on the market. And I would actually suggest looking into that shoe if you do have a wide foot and you want a shoe for versatile training. But again, this model should fit true to size for most foot anatomies. However, there will be some exceptions to where you're going to want to pass on the shoe or size down a half size based on how your foot's width is. So when it comes to the weight, heel to toe drop, and insole in this model, so I don't have my food scale on me because I'm on the road at the moment. However, the shoe feels very similar to the Nano X3. That model for my size 10 had a weight of 13.85 ounces. I would guess this shoe is probably a little bit heavier based on what it feels like. The heel to toe drop in this shoe is 7 millimeters, and that is consistent with the Nano X3, Nano X2, and Nano X1. And then looking at the insole in this shoe, you do have a thin foam removable insole. All right, so now let's go over the construction of the Reebok Nano X3 Adventure. Up here on the toe box, you have an extended outsole layer that wraps up, and then you have synthetic overlays that cover the toe box as well. Looking at the upper construction in this shoe, you have a blend of mesh and textile uppers that extend the entirety of this model. You have some layering here on the lateral and medial side of the forefoot, and then back here into the midfoot. And then you also have that lift and run chassis system. That's that plastic piece right here that runs from the medial side around the heel into the lateral side. Looking at the midfoot in this shoe, you have 5 core eyelets that go up. You have 2 additional loops here on the tongue for additional security, and the tongue itself is wide and padded, but it is not gusseted. I haven't had many issues with it sliding. Like, will it move during some lateral workouts? Yes, but not to a degree that I think really hinders the tongue's performance or its overall security. You have an external heel tab here, and then once again, as mentioned earlier, you do have a slightly more rigid upper here. So as you can see, this material is a little bit more rigid than padded, so that could be something that I could see bothering others in this model. Looking at the midsole in this shoe, you have a float ride energy foam that extends the entirety of the shoe's midsole, and then you have that Vibram rubber outsole. So as you can see, you have a full rubber tread, you have lugs from the base of the heel up here into the forefoot, and then you have a different texture back here on the heel for additional grip and bite. Once again, you do have a removable insole in this model, but that pretty much wraps up the gist of the shoe's construction. If you have additional questions on this model and its features, drop a comment down below. All right guys, that wraps up my review of the Reebok Nano X3 Adventure. Dare I say it, but I think this is the strongest Nano Adventure model to date. If you have additional questions on this shoe, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And if you have used the Nano X3 Adventure, what have your thoughts been? Let me know down below. But as always, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.